Hey everybody, I'm Matt Valley, and welcome to episode number 42 of the Rock and Roll Research Podcast, where we share the super cool backstories and side gigs of the research and insights pros that you trust. So about 5 years ago, I was living and working in New York City, and I was working for the great global insights agency Ipsos. And we had an office that was in Midtown Manhattan, right across from Rockefeller Center. We had an entire floor of that office. So lots of people, lots of departments, lots of lines of business. So you can imagine from an IT perspective, it was a pretty complex operation. Fortunately, we had really the best IT pro in the business in that office, Samiyyah Williams, there to take care of business every day and keep everything running like a top. Now, one day, Samiyyah announces to the organization that she's taking a 12-month sabbatical to travel the world. And I thought, wow, okay, that's really interesting. So many people say they want to do that, say they're going to do that, but they never get around to it, right? And so I thought, I really want to hear how this story turns out. I'm super excited for her, and I think it's going to be awesome. So I stayed in touch, I checked in, I just had to hear how the story ended. So I'm super excited to be able to have Samiyyah on the podcast today so that she can share this story with everybody here. So welcome to the podcast, Samiyyah.
Oh, wow. What a lovely intro, Matt. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure, honestly.
Yeah, I'm so glad we stayed in touch because I've just really wanted to hear what this is all about. So many people say they're going to do it, but you just actually did it. So I'd love to dig into that a bit today. But first of all, where in the world are you today?
I'm in Panama right now.
Great. ¿Cómo está?
Muy bien. They say, instead of hola, I have to get it out of my head. It's like, they go, buenas, buenas.
Works for me. All right, so we've got tons of really cool stuff to talk about. But let's start here. So you spent a long time at Ipsos. So tell me a little bit how you kind of got into that profession and how you found Ipsos.
So I started, how I got to Ipsos, I started in 2006, I believe. Yeah, 2006. And it's interesting because when people ask me about like, what kind of jobs you work and everything, and I've always been in corporate, like the moment where, when you turn 16, I think it is, and you sign on the line and you're like, okay, you get your papers to work. I went straight to corporate and I never left then. And throughout university, I always worked 2 jobs, and I was very interesting. And my last year in university, I had a internship at a pharmaceutical company. I worked at the IT department. There, I established a rapport with the VP. I believe his title was VP at the time over the IT department. And him and I stayed in touch the whole time. And I decided to leave that internship a year after I graduated from university, and he and I stayed in touch. And I think about, after I left that, I went on to do some like fun things, right? It was like, okay, I don't want to necessarily go into corporate. So I took like a consulting IT job, and then I did a little bit of modeling, and then I did wedding planner's assistant, and I went into an office and managed the office and did some payroll, and then ended up doing some HR stuff. And I was having a good time. I worked like part-time, and then in the afternoon, I go off to New York and do some fun things. And that for me, it felt like I was living, right? And so fast forward a little bit, about 2000, I'd say 2014, 2015, not 2015, 2000, I don't know what time it was. No, 2005, sorry, 2005. Sean, who was the VP at the time, again, I said, we stayed in touch. He reached out to me and said, hey, I'm working for this market research company and we have an IT position and I want to know if you're interested. And at that time, I was just having too much fun. I'm like, I'm going to give up this freedom. And I was like, no, I'm not ready. And I told him, I was like, no. And then besides, I wasn't ready to go back to New York. Like that was just too much. That was my first, where I worked, my first job. And I just was like, it's just too much. I didn't want the hustle and bustle. So I said, no. The following year, the same opportunity came around. How weird is that? Same opportunity came around. And he's like, now we have the opportunity again, but it's in the New Jersey office. And I'm like, okay. So at this time, things were kind of like settling in, and I'm thinking like, okay, I'm grown up mode now. I need a job. I went to school for 4.5 years, studied computer science. Somebody, you're not about to work in an office for the rest of your life doing office management. Like, so it's kind of like, okay, let's get back into it. So I went ahead, interviewed for the position. I honestly thought I bombed it. And a couple of days later, he's like, okay, we want to hire you. We want to bring you on board. And I'm like, really? And now I'm freaking out because I've been out of the field for a little bit, like just a couple years, but it's always one of those, IT is ever changing, right? So you're like, oh my gosh, did I just forget everything? And so they brought me on board, and I started November 6th. Can I tell you, like 2 or 3 days later, whatever happened that allowed them to put this position in New Jersey, that was reversed. And it had to go, and then I had to move to New York. So I'm like, so if I didn't talk to the guy that did the reverse, he was on my team later. But so anyway, that was reversed, and I went to New York. And that's when my career started, really with Ipsos, and ended with Ipsos. And honestly, Ipsos was like my first professional role, where you sign on, you get benefits, you get a salary, you get to work lots of overtime hours without overtime dollars.
That's right. Oh, the perks.
And I don't know what company does that. I know Goldman Sachs pays you for overtime on top of your salary, but I mean, I don't know what other company does that. But anyway, so yeah, that's where it all started, and it all ended. And I had a great time there. I really did have a great time, and so many opportunities were made available to me, and I don't regret it.
Cool. Well, you really owned that office in a lot of ways when it came to anything that had to do with IT, for sure. You were the go-to person, and it was going on 10 years that you were there, as I recall. So what changed? What led to this desire to see the world?
Well, it's one of those things where, you say as a kid, I want to be a doctor, and you kind of keep that in your head. And it was just one of the things where I said, I wanted to travel the world. I've just always been curious as a kid. I've had opportunities, I'm one of 4, it's all girls. And I've always been the one to leave the nest, so in some summers I go to camp. They'd not send me away, but I'm like, I want to go to camp, or I'd win a contest and I'd go away for 2 weeks. And I've just always been that. And I'm like, I've had this desire to see the world. Right. And so I remember my manager at the time, I'd probably say when we moved to the second New York office, right next to Rockefeller Center, so maybe like 2009-ish, I told my manager, I said, I read an article first, and this article planted the seed again, or watered that seed that was already planted. And it said like backpacking in Asia. And I can't remember the content, like the full content around it. It just was like backpacking in Asia. And I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that. And then I reached out to my boss. I'm like, does Ipsos allow you to take some time off to go back? Like, not backpacking, but just take time off to do whatever you want to do. He's like, I don't know. You have to inquire. So I was like, okay, I'll ask HR. And it wasn't at that time, but it was something that, okay, I'm going to ask HR, So fast forward to when things started to really feel heavy for me. And heavy in a way like, there was work. And for me, I didn't know how to set boundaries then. So it's like, you ask me something, it's like, okay, yeah, I get it done. Or even when I leave the office, I would go home and I'd be always on my phone working, answering emails. And no one asked me to do that. But, it's almost one of those uncommunicated expectations, right? It's like, well, we got your phone, so answer that. And then I'm in tech and I'm running in all, like, it was just me in the office for a very long time. And so I just felt like, in a way, always had to be on, but that also was a part of my personality, because my work ethic is just ridiculous. And that's not to like, hey, but that's even now, like I find it challenging to just find the balance between, okay, 2 hours work and then 2 hours get up and go rest or go make lunch or something. That's really a challenge for me. So anyway, so it was that, not being able to find the balance. There was family stuff, although it wasn't bad, but you just kind of like the go-to person for a lot of things. It becomes a bit much. And then I was also volunteering at my church at the time and in leadership, and I was over the toddlers ministry. And again, that was like, you have people here to help you, but not really allowing them to help me, feeling like I have to take on everything on myself, or I want it a certain way, so I can't really accept that help. And as a result, I just became overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to deal with it. And there was thoughts of, okay, do I leave my job? What do I want to do next? Do I want to stay in IT, already having some exposure to what life is outside of that? And so I'm like, okay, what do I want to do next? And it was just all of these thoughts. So 2015, I had 2 friends. One was a mutual friend and one was a friend from university. And I ran into them, or we kind of connected in some ways, shape or form. And they shared their story with me about taking a sabbatical. One was like 6 months, one was like 3 months or something. And I was so inspired, like that was it. It was like, after talking to them, that's what I need to do. And it was one of those like divine moments, those just like, you just know when you're knowing this is what needs to be done. I'm not second guessing it. No one can change my mind. I'm not questioning anything. I'm doing it. And from 2015 to 2016, I just started preparing to leave. And when I found this out, I was like, okay, I have to talk to the boss. What am I going to do? And I had 2 options. They say, no, I can't take the sabbatical. I have to quit. Okay, I'm fine with that. They say I can, and then I have to come back. So let's figure out a way where I don't necessarily have to come back, but then you always want those options, because sabbatical, like, it's not really known in America. I think more so now, but back then it was something that was popular in Europe, right? Or other parts of the world where and we worked, Ipsos is a global company based out of France. And so it's like, they know about this. This is nothing new to them, but to us, it was new. And so anyway, fast forward, I went ahead, started to do my research. And that little trusty handbook that HR gives you when you sign on that you never look through? Yeah. Well, you should kind of look through it, because there's stuff in there that will, that allows you to do it. You just don't know. And so I went through that. And then I started having a conversation with HR and saying, hey, can I do this? How can we make it work, or X, Y, Z? And so they ended up saying yes. And then we put all the ducks in a row to allow me to leave and hire a consultant to take on the office while I was away. And that was it. And I just went. I didn't look back. I just went.
Oh, fascinating story. So, okay, so let's hear about your itinerary. What did you do and why?
Okay, the itinerary was very ambitious. So Alexandrine, one of the, I call her my friend, because we stay in touch here and there now. And she was someone that traveled a lot and saw a lot of the world. And so I asked for her to help me. I'm like, okay, where am I going? I've seen a couple of countries, but it's been more like vacation themed rather than exploration. And so I'm like, okay, I want to see, 3 or 4 continents while I'm away, spend 3 months in each, and that will be a year. And so we put together like a list of 50 countries. And I'm like, yeah, I got a list of 50 countries, and, just go down the list. And honestly, I feel like I could have gotten through maybe like 20 or 30 of them, but I was able to see 10 of the countries. And I did that because when I first started, I started in Japan. The first 3 countries were Japan, Korea, and China. And I spent 2 weeks in each of those countries, and it moved so fast. And I did that because I had to. One, China wanted to know when you were coming, when you were leaving, and that was it. So I had to stick to the plan. By the time I got to Vietnam, I was like, that is exhausting. I was backpacking and just always on the go. Like, that's not how I wanted to navigate. You know, I took a year off to kind of be at ease, to not work, to explore, to be with myself and not feel the pressures, you know, and that just wasn't working for me. So when I got to Hanoi, I took like a weekend in Ha Long Bay, and it was like Christmas weekend. And then when I got back to Hanoi, I was like, okay, well, what am I gonna do now? I don't know what's next. I just know the next country, but in terms of me being in, you know, Vietnam, what's next? And I remember having a conversation with a guy I'm in Japan. His name was Kevin. Thank you so much, Kevin, for planting this seed. But he told me about, you know, when you get to Vietnam, you know, everyone does it. The culture is like, you know, motorbikes everywhere, but you got to do it. You can rent a motorbike, and there's like a motorbike trail. You can do that or whatever. And we talked a little bit about it. And so that conversation came up when I was thinking about, what am I going to do next? And I already had my motorbike license from 2004, like last year university. So I was like, okay, I know how to ride a motorcycle. But it's like, when you get to Vietnam, it's like, whoa, this is different, right? Yeah. And so I was a bit hesitant. I was a bit hesitant about that because it was the safety aspect of it. Right. And so I was like, okay. So I thought about it a bit. I'm like, okay, let me just go to a bike shop and explore that. I went there and I'm like, okay, well, to rent a bike or to buy a bike. And then there's the whole, because, you know, I'm on a budget, right? So there's the whole, what's going to be the best? Should I rent it? Should I buy it? I ended up buying it. And because that way I didn't have to worry about rushing to bring it back or paying extra if I was late or whatever. So I bought the motorbike. Right. And that was $750. Like, you know what, a Chinese version of a Honda Wing. It was like 125 cc's, but it worked. I had my backpack on it. You know, it was good. And so I bought the motorbike, and I set off to the north of Vietnam, and I was up there for about 30 days, so about a month. And I was able to visit like 30 something cities. And it was absolutely amazing. And so I went up, and I went to the very top, to Long Thu, very top of the most northern point of Vietnam. And then I came back down, and when I hit Hanoi, I was like, oh gosh, there's a post on my Instagram where I'm just literally out on the floor, and I'm like, wow, like that was an adventure. And so I kind of kicked it for a little bit in Hanoi, like about a week or two, just to settle in. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to continue riding out. So then after 2 weeks, I continued down to the south of Vietnam. And ultimately, I crossed the border to Cambodia and then crossed the border to Laos. And I was on the motorbike for 4 months before selling it to some French guys that were going back to Vietnam. So I'm like, yay, okay, take my baby back. And my baby's name was Sui. So take her back to Vietnam where she belongs. And that's what I did. And that was the highlight of my journey, to be honest. And I would not change it if someone paid me to or asked me, so I would not.
Oh, wow. That's amazing. So once you got to Vietnam, it was kind of like all bets are off about your original itinerary, right? It's just you go where life takes you, so to speak. Mm-hmm. Right? Cool. So what are maybe your favorite stories from that experience? Is there something that sticks out more than others?
Yes. So whenever someone asks me that, there's always the stories of when I'm on the motorbike. I didn't get this sense of timing, right? So I'd leave when I want to leave. I'd wake up when I want to wake up. But you really need to set out early so you can get to your destination and it's not dark. There was always the stories where I'm like, okay, I'm riding into the dark. Oh my gosh, I'm in the mountains. oh my gosh, there's going to be a lion or a tiger that's going to jump out and eat me. What if I can't find a hotel? I have to sleep on my bike. How am I going to do that? I'm always overthinking, but it's for the purpose of trying to like making sure I'm prepared for that. You know, there's nothing I haven't thought about. Okay, so if I thought about this, what is next? But there is a story that sticks out. I think I ended up leaving late, and it was getting late, and also during it was kind of like rainy season too, because I was in Vietnam for so long, but like there was a part of the road in the mountain where I cut down because I used Maps.me, and Maps.me has these little like inland roads. And so those are the roads you want to take because you get to see the country, you get to see the culture, the people, the small villages. And so those are always the roads that I took. And so there was this road that told me to go to my right. I veered up to the right, and it was like not paved. It was full of mud, like, you know, the red mud, the adobe color mud in Sedona with the rock, like that kind of mud. It was nasty. And I was just always like, okay, if I drop my bike, I'm going to be full of mud. And it's kind of one of those, like, you know, you feel like a kid, you don't want to get nasty and muddy. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. So I was very careful. And then I went down, took all of my mental energy, and I went down this road, and finally I passed the part where it was dirt, and I got to the end, and it's a dead end. And I'm like, are you kidding me? There's nowhere to go. Nowhere to go, but back the other way. And I'm like, I cannot do it. I cannot do it. Mentally, I cannot. So I get to the end of the road, and there's this house, like a couple, maybe like two houses. And there's this woman outside washing her clothes in a little bucket. And I'm like, where do I go? And she's like, and I'm like, no, I can't. Can I stay at your house? And she's like, I'm like, me, sleep, your house. And she's like, and so I pull out the translator. Thank God for Google Translator. And I translate it, and she's like looking at me like, okay, this is very weird. And so she gets on the phone and calls someone, and I later found out it's her husband. He works in the town near, like, you know, the next town over where they do business. And I guess he says yes or whatever. So she's like, okay. And I offered to pay her, you know, I'm like, I stay at your house, I'll pay you, no worries. And so I go into the house, and there really wasn't much dialogue going on, but for some reason I felt like it was okay. It was like, all right, no problem. So I sat out on the porch with her for a little bit. And then she invites me in the house. She feeds me. I get comfortable. There's like she had a daughter, and we're watching TV a little bit. It's getting late. I'm like, okay, I'll go to sleep. She shows me where I'm going to stay. I had my own room, and it was nice and clean, you know. And then I get ready for bed. And, you know, at this time, I'm like in my PJs. It's kind of cool because I'm in the mountains, and I have my little scarf on and everything. I'm just ready for bed. I do my late night check-in, social media. Okay, done. Now, going to sleep. Boom! I'm like, what's going on? And then I wake up, and like her whole family comes into the room, right?
Oh,
it's
wow.
Like sister. It's like the sister. It's the brother, the cousin. It literally was like 4 or 5 of them. They come in the room, and I felt like they were the police, and I was being interrogated. It was like, and I get it, you know, you're like, what are you doing here? Whatever. But at the same time, I'm like, really, guys, it's like 6 of you, 1 of me. I'm a female. I'm super slim. What am I gonna do?
Yeah.
And so one of I think the sister, she comes in, she's like asking me all these questions. Why are you here? Why didn't you go to a hotel? Why, you know, where are you from? And blah, blah, blah. So I started telling her, like, you know, it got late. It was muddy. I could not go back up that way. And I'm from, you know, the States. And I didn't know if there was a hotel nearby or whatever. After they got through, like, okay, she's cool. Then they're like, okay, selfie time. And it was like, I don't know what time it was. It was probably like 10 or 11. We're like selfie. We took like a half hour full of selfies, like selfie session. And then I'm like, okay, guys, you know, I love to interact with the locals. That was like the experience of my journey. But like, I'm like, okay, night time. I have to go to sleep, please. And so after they left, I honestly had to record this. And it's somewhere on my Facebook page. And that was it. And I went to bed and it was like, okay, got up in the morning. I think she made me breakfast and then I left and that was it. And I don't even think she took my offering, right?
Yeah.
To pay for the night. But like, it was just that was it. And that was my experience. Like, I think that was the seal breaker for all the other times where I just randomly stayed at people's homes and it was safe and I'm alive, and some of the highlights of my 18 months away in Asia.
Oh, wow. I'm sure there are so many cool stories in addition to that, but I just love that. I love that. That's awesome. So you ended up staying longer than you expected, right? So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the return back to normal life.
So it was after like 12 months, obviously, you know, I'm like, I think at this point I was in Thailand and I'm like, okay, it's 12 months is approaching and I need to decide what I'm going to do. But it was like, I'm not ready to go back, you know? And so I'm like, okay, well, I have to have the conversation. So I ended up calling my boss at the time and saying, hey, you know, I'm not ready to come back. And so, you know, I guess I'm just going to have to resign. And I was in Myanmar and he's like, yeah, you know, no problem. I understand. And blah, blah, blah. And because I worked with the CEO, both CEOs, like really closely, right? But at this time, the current CEO. And I had to tell him, I was like, okay, I have to give him a call. And I feel like that was the harder call to make because I felt like we had more of a rapport than my actual boss. Because, you know, he's there, I support him all the time. And so I'm like, I call him, he's on his way to the airport. And I'm like, you know, hey, I'm not ready to come back. And so, you know, I spoke to Admiral's my boss, and I'm going to resign, I guess. And he's like, well, when are you thinking about coming back? When do you know? And literally, Matt, I'm on the other end and I'm like, I called too quick. I have no idea. He doesn't know this story, right? But if he ever watches this podcast, he's gonna be like, really? But so I didn't know, you know, and I'm like, wow, is this really happening? Like, is he offering me more time to think it out and to decide what it is that I want to do? And I was so grateful. And I was like, I don't know, 6 months. And he was like, okay, well, we have things in place. Nothing needs to be changed. Nothing's on fire right now. So take the time. And, you know, when you get back, we will discuss it or whatever. And I'm like, wow, okay, thank you so much. You know, I hang up and my travel continues on. And again, I think it was about like April, so maybe like 4 months or so in, 4 months extended after the 12. And I'm like, okay, well, it's getting to that point again. And at this time, I was getting like in my head, I want to see my family, you know, and it wasn't like I just miss them, but I'm like, okay, I've already decided that living abroad is something that I want to do. And I want to travel more. So that was already decided. And then it was like, well, if I'm going to do this, I need to go back home and I need to wrap up a few things, right? There's my things I need to put away, or I need to, you know, just work, it's family and all that. And so in June it was, I'm like, okay, I booked my ticket. And then July, like the weekend of July 4th or something like that, I went home. I surprised everyone. No one knew I was coming home except like 2 or 3 people from my emergency contact. It was 4 of them. And I didn't want my mom to know because I was going back to her house. So I knock on the door. It's like 11 o'clock at night. And she's like, who is it? And I'm like, open the door, you know, like it's important. She opens the door and she's like, oh my gosh, starts crying. So excited to see me. And so it was my grandmother. And yeah, so it was like being back home. It was like, I don't know. It felt weird. It felt good to see my family, but then it felt weird because it's like, oh, this is what it's like to be back home. There's a whole world out there. I just experienced a whole world, a portion of the whole world. Yeah, no, this is not for me. And so it was like, okay, spending the time with them, deciding what I wanted to do with my job. I ultimately ended up resigning because I was like, yeah, I can't go back. I can't go back to something I already knew at this time now, including a sabbatical, was about 8 years. And I was like, I just can't go back to that. I didn't want to get back into the hustle and bustle of things. I wanted to just maintain this kind of sense of peace, or just calm and kind of flow and ease. And ultimately, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, you know? And so that was it. I resigned, and I was like, okay, October of 2018, I'm leaving. I'll step back out. But ultimately that changed. Some things came up with my dad, and I had to go down to Virginia and help him out with that. And that was a bit of back and forth. And then I took whole 2019 to kind of prepare. And then here we go. COVID came, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm not going anywhere right now. And then fast forward, you know, I met my partner now, and, you know, she was like, okay, we kind of like our plans was in alignment in terms of leaving again. And so in October of 2020, we left together. We started in Mexico, and then Costa Rica, and then Panama. And that's been it. I'm like, so now I'm on this journey again, and I'm looking for a home. I'm looking for a home abroad. And I'm trying not to move so much because I'm working, one. Two, I'm carrying a lot of luggage, and that's not fun. But also, three, it's like, I just want to kind of feel, can I live here for an extended period of time, you know, and maybe not forever, but at least 2 years straight, you know? So that's kind of like where I am now, and what that feeling was like when I went home. It just was like, it's the same thing. I was maybe 36-ish or 37, I don't even know, when I went back, and it was like, that was my whole life in America. That's all I knew. I know what it was like. And I felt like something else is out there, and I need to explore that, and I need to discover it, and I need to just expand. And that, I felt like that's the only way I could do that. Yeah. Here I am.
Yeah. Once you kind of discover that wanderlust, it's a genie that you can't put back in the bottle, right? Yeah. Yeah. And I understand that. So with everything that you've learned and experienced, you mentioned you're working now. How does what you've learned translate into what you're doing now and what you might expect to do in the future?
Wow. So I've learned so much in that time away, honestly. And I probably will get a little teary-eyed, so I won't apologize, because tears are very important.
No.
But I learned so much about myself, and just being courageous. You know, people say that, like, oh my gosh, you're so brave. I can't believe you did that. And I'm like, really? I just did it. You know, I didn't really think about it. There's those moments where I really sit, and I'm like, yo, I did that. You know, it's like, pat yourself on the back a little bit.
Right.
But I learned so much about myself. Like, I can do it. Whatever I put my mind to, I can do it, you know? I also discovered, like, I'm someone that just loves and values and appreciates freedom, like the freedom to be creative, the freedom to just go and move, and the freedom to be true to who I am and how I want to show up as Samiyyah, as a Black female in this world. And like, I wanted to remain true to that. And I discovered that, I tapped into that when I was on that trip. And I'm like, there's no way I'm going back to the more sheltered Samiyyah, you know, and even like honoring my voice and how I feel, you know, it's like, if you know me, you know, you're going to know how I feel, right? It's like, now I'm saying that, and I don't want to, and not that I didn't do that before, because I think that's a quality that the people that I worked with, even at Ipsos, they appreciate it. Like, you know, I never wavered, or I never treated anyone differently. I've always been true to who I am, and like everyone, I don't care who you are, exec level or just an entry level, you're going to get treated the same way. And I think I can say that, Matt, you can speak
True.
to if I was consistent.
True. Sample size of one here, but definitely true.
So that was, so that was always me. And I just wanted to continue that. And I wanted the freedom to just work where I wanted to work and do what I wanted to do. If I wanted to be in tech one day, great, I can do that. If I did not want to do it, then okay, tomorrow I'll do something else and I'll go back to tech the next day. I just wanted that freedom. And so in 2020, I ended up starting my own consulting company, Divine Consultants, which is a tech and lifestyle consulting company. So it allows me, the lifestyle part of it allows me to do the other things, right? The other things that I tapped into outside of tech. And I started that in 2020. I've had a couple of clients so far, actually a few, more than two, so a few. And it's been going good. And that's kind of what I'm focusing on now. And it allows me the opportunity to just show up and run my business based on the things that I value and what's important to me. It also allows me to choose the client that I want to work with. It's not about money for me. It's never really been about money for me. Money is great because it allows you the freedom to do things like travel the world without worrying about stuff. But, it's not everything. It's not your mental peace. It's not, the joy or just, it's not any of that, And so that's kind of how I want to show up in my business. That's what I want to extend to my clients. And, if it's not a right fit, it's just not a right fit. I want to, be able to make that decision. So those are some of the things that I'm just bringing into the Samiyyah now, the Samiyyah that I'm continuing to cultivate on a daily basis, the Samiyyah that now owns her own business. And I just want to be the person you're talking to now is the person that you would talk to off camera. That's how I want to be. I want to be consistent. I want to be intentional. I want to live life on purpose every minute. Like I want to feel. And sometimes that's not so good because I have friends that go, you sort of feel everything. And I'm like, yeah, it's meant to be felt, but, it's that's how I want to live life. I want to live life like that. And so that's what I'm taking from that experience and trying to just apply it to my everyday life, my business life, and whatever I choose to do.
Yeah, it's so inspiring. I just have to say, what I love to hear from what you're talking about is related to something I think about, which is I never want to get to a point where it feels like the world is no longer this huge base of possibilities, right? Where all of a sudden you're on the track and that's the last track, right? It's still, sounds like for you, it's still just totally wide open, where life takes you, it's where it takes you, but it could be so many different directions, and it's really exciting.
Right. And allowing yourself to just be open to that, right? Because I feel like there's always this, resistance or, we have our plan, right? We always have our plan. I want to climb the ladder. I want to be CEO. I want to be this. I want to be that. And those are great, right? But I think we get so laser focused in that path that we don't allow spirit, the divine or purpose to set in and allow us to shift, allow us to, change the trajectory of where we think we should be going and where we really need to go to really get to ultimately what it is we're trying to manifest, And I think it's important to find that balance. It's okay to have your goals, but leave that little door, leave that little space open to change.
Cool. So Samiyyah, is there any media like books or podcasts or anything that you follow that provides ongoing inspiration for you that you could share?
So, Matt, I'm all things like, okay, how does the human mind really think? What about how do we relate with each other, relationships and love and all those things? So anytime there's a conversation, I'm like, ooh, okay. So I have a list of people that I'm kind of cycling through right now on podcasts mainly. I'm not a heavy reader. I don't know. I've never been, but Anyway, so I substitute my podcast or audibles for those, but I'm circling or rotating Mark Groves, creator, Create the Love. You've heard of him?
I have, yeah.
Okay, great. I love Mark. And then there's Jay Shetty, who talks about, On Purpose. That's his podcast. And then there is, I think, Coming Home by Dr. Thurma. She's a therapist. And I love that because it's about coming back to yourself, like reconnecting to yourself and the things that you really want. And then there's also a part of this podcast, which is Tapped. People are, therapists are people too. And that's really interesting because I've started going to therapy during COVID, and it's just nice to kind of see the other side of the person, not just, so tell me about your day today. How do you want to deal with this? So it's nice to see them as humans, and it's 3 of them, and they just let the hair down, let the guard down, and they talk about a bunch of different random topics. So those are my go-tos at the moment.
Okay, great. So, this is a rock and roll research podcast, Samiyyah. So this has just been absolutely fascinating, but also equally fascinating. It's just a question I have to know, right? So you're stranded on a desert island, which very well may happen someday, right? Maybe it's
also actually.
So if and when that does happen, let's say you've got 3 records of your choosing, company for the rest of your days. So what are those records, Samiyyah?
Okay, so if I'm magically stranded on an island, I'm gonna magically create my own records. Back in the day when you create your own cassettes and you record your songs. So I'm gonna magically record my own songs on these. So there would probably be like 3 categories, right? One would be more of my spiritual grounding. So I have to have my Hill song in there, a song that I like right now that it's on rotation. It's called Awake. Another song that I really played during my travel was Oceans. And then I need to have my soulful love jams. I need to feel like someone's holding me and I want to dance. And, so I need to refer to my Whitney Houston. And I need to refer to my Anita Baker, Patti LaBelle.
Oh, yeah.
And then I need to have my turn-up music, because we all have to have. So your turn-up music is probably rock and roll, right?
Well, yeah, a little bit of
that. My turn-up music is more like Beyonce. So I think anything Beyonce that's very fast-paced and like, hey, let's party, that's going to be my mixed album. So those are my 3 categories, and I'll make my own mix, and they will magically appear on the island with a magic record player.
It's got to be on vinyl. I mean, that's the way to do it. So, all right, super cool. Well, I look forward to that day. Let me know when you're there, or I'll come by and say hello.
Okay.
Let me know where to find it. Give me the GPS coordinates.
Absolutely.
Right. Excellent. Well, this has just been such a wonderful, inspiring conversation, Samiyyah. I'm so glad that we're able to close the loop and satisfy my own curiosity for your travels and where it's taken you, not just physically, but also mentally and spiritually. So it's great to be chatting with you here today. I really appreciate it, and rock and roll.
Rock and roll. Thanks so much, Matt. It was so much fun.